The idea that our moral words are merely expressions of emotions makes a whole lot of sense, because with it, many philosophical problems just disappear. But it possesses one deep flaw: the Frege-Geach problem. This problem is very abstract and can be hard to understand, so the aim of this video is to explain it as simply as possible. Hello everyone, my name is Pelle W. I'm a philosopher with a degree from Lund University, and I make content here on YouTube specifically about analytic philosophy. And today we're discussing the Frege-Geach problem. So let's get started. Before we get to the problem at hand, we need to discuss a few things. Firstly, I'll give you some background information about emotivism that you need to know. And then we'll talk about two features within logic that you must understand in order to fully grasp the issue. And then thirdly, we'll get into the Frege-Geach problem. So let's begin with emotivism. I've already gone into depth about what emotivism is in another video, but the main thing you need to know here is that, according to emotivism, all moral words lack truth value. They do not describe the world in any sense. They are merely expressions of feelings or sentiments. A.J. Ayer would even say that they are meaningless terms, because they are non-verifiable. Moral words are what's called non-assertoric, meaning they don't function as claims about truth, but more like expressions of approval or disapproval. There are many reasons why one should be an emotivist, because it solves a lot of problems within the domain of metaethics. But when you solve a problem, usually new ones crop up in a completely new form. And in 1960, Frege-Geach wrote this teeny tiny article, barely 5 pages long, called Ascriptivism, which shook emotivism and all other similar theories to the core. But before we can get into Geach's critique of emotivism, we need to understand two very important features within logic. Bear with me here. These features are really key to fully understanding the problem. First off, let's discuss hypotheticals. Take this rather absurd argument. If the ice is hot, then I would burn myself touching it. The ice is hot, therefore I would burn myself touching it. This argument is obviously false, but it has the form of a standard modus ponens argument and is therefore valid. So there's something wrong with the premises. Let's go through them. This might sound weird, but P1 is actually true. You have to look at the premise as a whole. The thing here is that P1 does not actually assert any real property of ice. It doesn't claim that ice is hot at all. It merely claims what would be the case within a hypothetical scenario if ice was hot. So this premise predicates the property of hotness without asserting that it is in fact hot. So there is a big difference between assertions and predications. But here is an important point. In order for me to claim whether or not the hotness of ice would imply that I would burn myself on it, I need to be able to imagine a hypothetical scenario where ice indeed is hot, to know whether it actually implies that I would burn myself on it, right? And indeed, I can imagine a world where ice is hot, even if it's far-fetched, right? But therefore, this premise is true, because hotness usually implies that I would burn myself touching it. This is actually what's called a counterfactual, but don't worry about that now. Another important point. If I didn't know what hot meant, or if we changed the word to something like florpton, now I'm unable to tell whether this premise is true anymore. Because I can't even imagine a hypothetical scenario where ice is florpton, and if I can't imagine such a scenario, I don't know whether it would imply that I would burn myself touching the ice. So in this case, the sentence becomes false, or meaningless, or at least uncertain. So in order to assert the truth of any if-then sentence, I must be able to imagine a case where the antecedent, the first part of the sentence, holds true, to know whether it would actually imply the consequent, the last part of the sentence. Now, let's move on to the second premise. This premise is obviously false, but it's false because it asserts a property of ice which ice doesn't have. Here, we've made an important distinction. The first premise is true because it makes what is called a non-assertoric predication about ice, while the second premise is false because it asserts a property of ice which it doesn't have. So there's a big difference between merely predicating a property non-assertorically and assertorically predicating a property. This was the big discovery by Gottlob Frege, hence the name, the Frege-Geach Problem. But before we get into the problem, let's discuss the second thing that I wanted to talk about, the fallacy of equivocation. Let's consider another absurd argument, shall we? If something is blue, then it's a color. Jack is blue, therefore Jack is a color. There's an obvious problem here, right? The word blue possesses different meanings between the premises. If we change the second premise to Jack is sad, which is actually what we mean, right? Then the conclusion obviously doesn't follow. In order for truth to carry on through the premises, the words that are used must possess the same meaning at all times. Now, with all this in mind, we can finally move on to the Frege-Geach problem. So consider this third argument. If it's wrong to gamble, then it's wrong to invite people to gamble. It's wrong to gamble, therefore it's wrong to invite people to gamble. Let's discuss the second premise. This premise asserts that gambling is wrong. But Emotivism claims that whenever one asserts a moral property, they are in fact not asserting anything at all. They are merely expressing an emotion towards the act. Moral words such as bad or wrong lack truth value and are meaningless. So all moral words, according to Emotivism, are non-assertoric expressions of feelings or emotions that lack truth value. They do not describe the world at all.
And this explanation works fine for the second premise, but what is going on within the first one? As we have discussed, within an if-then sentence, I am not asserting any actual property. I am merely stating what would be the case in a hypothetical scenario where gambling is wrong. So I can with confidence say that this premise is true without asserting the wrongness of either acts. I can confidently express P1 without any emotions towards either acts.
But if all our moral words just are emotions, then what's going on here?
So here's the kicker. If the word wrong is meaningless as the emotivists claim, how am I supposed to imagine what the wrongness of gambling would imply in a hypothetical scenario where it holds true? Just like when we discussed ice that was florpten. Since florpten is meaningless, I don't know what it implies. And by the same logic, if wrong is meaningless, I wouldn't be able to know what that implied either. So the thing with hypotheticals is that they demand at least a possible truth value in order to be functional at all.
So by claiming that moral words lack truth value, the emotivist fails to explain how our moral words function when they are embedded within logical structures such as disjunctions or if-then sentences. They only explained moral sentences within assertoric contexts such as gambling is bad. The easy way out for an emotivist is to claim that their analysis only works in assertoric context, such as when someone claims that something is bad. But that solution is gravely mistaken. By doing so, the first premise becomes descriptive, because it describes a hypothetical state of affairs where gambling is in fact wrong. But the second premise completely lacks truth value, and that would mean that the word wrong has different meanings between the premises, and we have a fallacy of equivocation here. But that is unacceptable. We can all see that this is a valid argument. There shouldn't be an equivocation here at all.
The big question is, why should moral words change in meaning whether they are asserted or not, when our intuition tells us that they don't?
And it is also the case that any complete semantic theory about what our moral words means needs to be able to explain how they function within non-assertoric context, but this, obviously, emotivism fails to do. This is quite an abstract problem, so don't worry if you don't understand it completely yet. Let it take some time. But the main point you need to understand is that emotivism fails to explain how our moral words function within non-assertoric contexts, such as if-then sentences or even questions. And because they fail to do so, all non-assertoric contexts calls for a different explanation. But that means that the meaning of our moral words fluctuates between contexts. And that is what produces the fallacy of equivocation. There are proposed solutions to the problem, but if you want to learn more about emotivism, then I suggest you to check out this video here where I explain it more thoroughly. But thank you so much for watching. Take care.